And we will definitely be kicking off in just another minute. So I think I've got a few more people who have sent me messages saying that they're gonna join us, but I'm gonna kick us off and keep us on track. If folks can mute themselves throughout the presentation, and then I'm gonna open this up to everybody so that they can ask me all the questions, because I know that there's a lot of questions about this topic. So I'm going to keep us on time track, and that means I'm going to just share some slides. I have a few slides that I've prepared for today, so we'll go through those. Welcome. I appreciate everybody joining us for today's conversation. We're going to be talking about delivering coaching and feedback remotely. But before I do that, I want to thank our sponsors, the Remote Nation Institute, and who's partnered with my company, Sophaya, to be able to bring you our topic today. Obviously, it's an extraordinary time right now. People have been forced into something that a lot of people are calling remote work, but I want to be really clear, as somebody who's launched a lot of remote work programs and has worked remotely since the 90s as part of both virtual teams and dispersed teams and just organizations that were international. This is not remote work. This is emergency work from home isolation. And so even those of us who are familiar with this type of work are feeling a little frazzled and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, because we're in nonstop meetings, either on platforms like Teams, which we're highlighting in this webinar today, this executive briefing today. And this is important. We're trying to give people lots of opportunity to practice in these environments, because clearly they've become part of your landscape, whether you wanted to or not. And so suddenly you're finding yourself working in these circumstances quite out of your control. Luckily, we have partners like Microsoft that have worked with us at Sophaya to help us enable you technically to be able to come together as a group and share information, so we can share information with you and help give you tips and tricks that will really prepare you for some of the things that you're dealing with on a daily basis, as well as things that you can translate to the future. So the first thing that I want to assure you is that we're doing these in 30-minute increments, and we're doing that on purpose because we want to really give you bite-sized chunks on a weekly basis. We're doing the executive briefings as a pro bono opportunity to share our expertise with people who are really in a difficult circumstance right at this point in time. They're being forced to do stuff that they may not be familiar with, and we want to make sure that you've got lots and lots and lots of great techniques and best practices and actions that you can take to make your day a little lighter. So today's topic, which is obviously about coaching and feedback, is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart. And one of the reasons that it's very, very important, and I think it's a critical part of what's happening today, is because you've got lots and lots and lots of people who have been forced into circumstances that are very abnormal. And there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, and and regardless of your organization, even if you're used to working in a remote work or a dispersed work situation, we are now completely devoid of human contact, and that's just, it's weird. It's weird. It's not comfortable. And one of the things I can tell you is that every day I'm talking to clients, I'm talking to organizations, even folks that have very robust remote work programs, and I'm getting a couple of things. The first thing is that every single person is saying, I'm tired of talking about the coronavirus. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to talk about something else. Let's talk about the weather. Let's talk about your pets. Let's talk about your kids. Let's talk about anything but the virus. And then the other thing that's happening is that every single extrovert now is looking for a hug. So people are feeling a little stressed. They're feeling a little afraid around the edges. We're getting a little shaggier. You know, we haven't had a chance to go out in the sunshine as much as we usually do, and we haven't had contact, and we're feeling a little worn. So this is one of the reasons, and I think that when you're talking about feedback, it's such a necessary mental health exercise for anybody who's working with any kind of remote team. If anybody is connecting with other folks, and I would even extend this, that we're not just talking about people who are within your organization, but we're also recommending to all of our clients that they're using this time period to not only reach out to their partners, their strategic partners, their vendors, but also their clients, their customers, the people that they interact with, who purchase their goods, who purchase their services, because everyone is having a universal experience right now. And so the more that you can connect with folks and you can give people feedback in lots of different ways, then the better off everyone's going to be. Appreciate that in the circumstance that we're living in right now, feedback is not only a mental health exercise, but it's necessary, because everybody's doing things that they would prefer not to do. They're doing things out of concern for others. They're doing things because they're executing their civic duty. They're engaging in these behaviors to keep themselves and their family and their friends and other folks safe and healthy. But it doesn't mean that we would prefer to interact this way on a routine basis. And if we are not getting feedback on our performance, if people aren't giving us some sort of indication of how we're doing, then we feel a little lost. It's almost like we're sitting in a black hole, and that black hole is not very interactive. We can't get the energy dynamic that we would get when we are interacting with other folks in some sort of a face-to-face situation. But even in the circumstances that we're in, we're very often cloistered in smaller workspaces where we might be bumping into individuals on such a routine basis that, you know, we're feeling a little frayed around those relationships. But if you're an essential employee and you're out in the world, then you're feeling a little anxious, because if you get too close to someone, we've almost gotten to the point where now we're starting to feel anxious every time somebody comes a little close to us physically. And so there's lots of things happening and lots of things going on. So having routine contact, having people that we trust give us some sort of an indication of where we stand, allows us to be able to gather a bit of comfort, but also to be able to hear from people what their perception is of our performance given all of the circumstances. From a leadership and a supervisory perspective, the other thing that we're telling all of our clients is, you know, ignoring coaching moments at this particular point in time means you're going to lose an opportunity. And I can talk to you specifically about a circumstance where we worked with a healthcare system where we've been working with them for the last 6 years. doing developmental activities with their physicians, and we were in the middle of a physicians leadership program. We transitioned the program to an online program, and even though we're in the midst of a health crisis, the group of folks that we're working with have asked that we maintain contact, and we're doing that through Microsoft Teams on a weekly basis so that they can visually stay connected with their cohort and be able to, just brainstorm with each other, run ideas by each other, help each other with resources, share tips, and share ideas. And so there's lots of compelling reasons why people should be coming together, even though it is an extraordinary circumstance. We're finding that people remember how they're being treated during this time period. Your team people are going to notice the way you led them. You're going to notice the way your organization's leadership took this situation and transformed itself. So we've got individuals who have been stepping up, doing live town halls, who have been staying in contact, who are engaging in social activities with their folks, who are acknowledging that it's a unique and really extraordinary time, and they're allowing their humanity to show. And so we're asking people to really think about ways that you can continue to interact with your people so that you're giving them a positive memory, something good to hold on to in a circumstance that is truly extraordinary. When we think about any sort of feedback and coaching in a virtual environment where it's going to be enabled by technology, we follow a very simple 4-step process. And that's the 4-step process that I'm going to share with you today. In a virtual environment, in a remote team environment, remember, this is a moderated forum. And what I mean by that is somebody has to engage with someone else. They have to invite someone else. They have to send out invitation for some sort of a technology engagement, whether it's a video engagement or an audio engagement. And we're not going to be getting together face to face. And so you have to structure these encounters a little bit differently. There's a lot more planning involved. There has to be conscious effort, and you got to be very conscious of the fact that when you're reaching out to anybody in these circumstances, there's a lot of interesting dynamics that we're going to talk about when we talk about the 4-step process, where how you reach out to someone, how you interact with them in these environments has to be very carefully scheduled and planned and explained, because if you don't, people will jump to their own conclusions, and sometimes not in such a great way. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about the 4 steps that we recommend that you take when you're working with your remote teams and you're thinking about how do I give them feedback, how do I continue to coach them, and how do I continue to stay in contact with them in a good way. So as I mentioned, in these environments, remember, this is a moderated forum. And, practicing with the technology is going to be a critical part, because the majority of people that we're dealing with right now across the globe, it doesn't matter where you are, where there were many people who were very reluctant to engage in video at the pace and the volume that they're getting faced with video conferencing right now. They're being asked to come onto multiple video platforms. We're using Teams because Microsoft Teams is a great partner for us, and they have been very helpful in setting up these briefings. But we also have other partners that we've utilized in the past. Zoom, Join Me, GoToMeeting, WebEx. So our clients are using video platforms all across the board. And that means that you're going to be interacting in these forums, probably in environments that feel a little foreign to you, and definitely feel foreign to an individual that you're going to deliver a coaching conversation with, or feedback conversations. And so making sure that you're taking the time to figure out how the platforms work and testing them beforehand, and utilizing friends and family to practice in these forums so that you have a certain comfort level. This is going to be really important, because we always say to folks who are doing this for the very first time, think of it as the rule of three. The first time you come into a video conference room, it's going to feel really strange to you, because you're going to be cueing off the fact that you can see yourself, and you're going to be worried about your looks and all of that sort of stuff. And we have to remind our clients that when you showed up at a meeting for the very first time and you walked into the room, that you were visible, that people could physically see you. But what happens in the video context is, not only can other people see you, but you can see yourself. And so in this context, it's a little disorienting at first. But the second time you do it, it's less disorienting. And by the third time you do it, you're starting to feel it's a little more natural. And by the fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh time that you do it, now you're actually going to miss the visual contact. We find that groups that have been utilizing video on a routine basis, when they go to audio, they feel like something's missing. And so appreciate that the more you can come into these video environments and the more you can practice, the better off you're going to be. Now, you're going to notice that I've got a very neutral backdrop in back of me. And part of the reason that we do this is, first of all, it's something that we find is going to provide a professional backdrop for any of the interactions that we're having, regardless of our clients. But if you're working in your particular workspace, you're probably in a home or some sort of a non-traditional work area. Appreciate the fact that you got to mind your frame. And this is going to be very important, because whatever's sitting behind you can be a distraction. And so minding your frame, coming into the call, really taking a look at what is around you is going to make a big difference. And it's also going to allow the person who's interacting with you to focus on you, as opposed to something behind you. Of course, we've gotten to the point now with the video conferencing with both Microsoft Teams as well as Zoom. There are electronic backdrops that you can add that will add a little levity. And we're actually encouraging remote teams to utilize those backdrops during social interactions to add a little levity into this situation. So, depending on who you're talking to, you can have a little fun with the backdrop, or you might actually be using it as a social moment with your remote team. Now, our second step for any sort of feedback or coaching that you're going to have is to set up preliminary meetings with your staff so that you can set expectations and discuss the coaching and the feedback process that you're going to utilize with your teams, so that there are no surprises. And this is an important consideration, folks. First of all, I don't know what your relationship has been with your team to this point. I don't know how much feedback you've had an opportunity to give them, how often you have engaged in feedback. But with remote teams, feedback is a crucial part of the glue that holds remote teams together. But I would argue that unless you've actually sat down with someone and outlined for them what it is that you expect of them, what kind of interactions you're going to set up with them and how those interactions are going to be structured, then reaching out to someone and just scheduling some sort of a feedback conversation or a coaching conversation without a context is incredibly stressful. People are going to assume that they're in trouble. People are going to assume that they're probably going to assume you're going to lay them off. They're going to assume you're going to fire them. We've had every reaction under the book, under the under the sun that you could possibly imagine. And in today's world, there's just a heightened sense of anxiety as to why you're asking somebody to schedule time with them. So please, please, please make sure that you're setting the stage first, having that preliminary meeting, discussing the coaching process, the feedback process, and make sure that this is a one-on-one meeting so that everyone knows what it feels like. So that, remember, rule of 3, the first time you're getting together, you've already practiced, so you're feeling a little more comfortable with the technology, but they may not. And so that one-on-one allows the two of you to be able to get into the video circumstance and have that back and forth. And even if this is an audio call, same sort of thing. Set the stage beforehand, walk people through, answer questions, lay out the plan, and make sure that they have a clear sense of what they can expect, why it relates to their job, and what it is that you're asking of them. I think coaching and feedback in any context when you're dealing with real life people has always been a hard thing for a lot of people. And I think that regardless if you're in a more traditional circumstance or whether you're in a remote circumstance, there's always been an element of anxiety when it comes to coaching and feedback, because as leaders, if we are not comfortable sitting down and being honest with people about their performance, then it is as stressful for us as leaders as it is for folks that are on the other side of the interaction. And so the more that you can honestly lay out the plan, lay out the circumstance, the better off you're going to be. And then once you deliver the coaching feedback, here's the beautiful part. If you've scheduled it in advance, you've had that preliminary meeting, then now you're bringing people in a second time. They're going to feel a little less anxious. And that means that having the feedback is really a matter of following the protocols that you've already set. So once you've set those protocols with people, now you're just going to execute on what you've already told them you're going to do, which means it gives you a chance to own the meeting, take the lead, and go through the process that you outlined before, and then invite comments. If you're keeping things focused on work performance in relation to job responsibilities and expectations, and you've already outlined this for people, you've set up those expectations, and you've allowed time for them to comment, and you're practicing active listening during this process, you're going to get a much better result. Now, no matter what, as I said, I think feedback sessions and coaching sessions, depending on your history with your people and who they are and how long you've worked together and the level of trust between you, even in the best of times, people can get defensive or feel anxious and jump to conclusions that they are somehow being demeaned or disrespected, or that you're criticizing them in some ways. In this circumstance, you got to prepare for emotion even more, because right at this point in time, nothing is the same as it was. And individuals on your team that you're sitting down and having conversations with might be dealing with stress that you didn't anticipate, that you don't know anything about. And so starting your conversation, your coaching and feedback conversation with, how are you doing? How you feeling? How's your family? A little bit of preliminary personal introduction is always going to be preferred. Step 4 is really kind of the framework for how you work with people remotely anyway, which is, how do you create a work structure that fits a remote work reality? But I would say, how do you fit a new work structure that fits today's reality, which is really kind of changing day to day, a very emotional setting, people completely out of their comfort zones. And one of the things we've talked about in all of these briefings is we've talked about the need to set expectations up front with your folks, but to set expectations based on the realities of the job requirements today. And then anytime you're doing coaching and feedback, applying your coaching and feedback comments against the expectations that you've set. And this allows you an opportunity to observe behavior against those expectations. And then the more routinely you're providing a performance feedback, and the more consistently you're providing feedback against those expectations, the more normal it feels. And the more you can normalize things, the more comfortable people are going to get. But you also have to remain flexible, and you have to be able to tweak as you go along, because remember, in this circumstance, people are feeling out of their norms and things are still changing. And depending on what's happening in someone's household or what's going on with them, then that's going to impact their emotional state. And then finally, this is all about building trust. How do you deliver coaching and feedback comments that are honest, that are objective, but that are work performance focused based on the expectations that you've set with people? And then how do you show consistency? So if you're telling people this is the process, how do you walk your talk and follow that process? If you schedule time with people, how do you follow through with that? How do you admit that this is also new for you too? How do you acknowledge that the two of you have to work on this together? And sometimes you're going to make mistakes. You might misinterpret something. They might misinterpret something. How are you going to navigate that? And how do you encourage and support the very steep learning curve that is happening with all your people right now? By showing consistency, by treating people with respect, by acknowledging the human dynamic that's happening, and allowing each of you to really show your human side. And this is going to be really, really important. So at this moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close off on my screen share right at this point in time, and I'm going to open it up to the group, and I'm going to say to the group, what questions do you have for me today? Because I know that this is certainly a hot topic, and at the best of times, trying to give people really positive and productive, because sometimes productive means it might not be, you might be telling people that they missed the mark, but you can do that very productively, and you can quite frankly do it very positively if you've shown a real respect for your people, caring for your people, and if your people trust you a lot. They will absolutely appreciate it, and they'll be better for it in the end. So if anybody has any questions, if you just want to indicate to me in chat. And I'm seeing Bobby. Hi, Bobby.
Hi.
You got a question for me?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is kind of balancing the appearing on screen and I'm going to call it Zoom exhaustion. So, if like you're giving feedback and stuff, it's great to be face to face, but at the same time, we're all tired of being on screen.
Yeah, and I actually, as somebody who started out in Zoom meetings at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Times today, so Yeah, I've been doing back-to-back facilitations and conversations and coaching and work with my clients today, and I know exactly what you mean. I think part of that is it kind of depends, Bobby, on a couple of things. First of all, if you've been working with your team for a very long time and there's a high degree of trust, so you know. There may be time periods where somebody says, listen, can we do a phone call today instead of the video chat today? Because my house is a mess and I don't want to do a funny background today. Then listen to that person. I think that the value of video initially is, if you're going to explain a process to someone and you're going to talk to them about the construct, what's the context that you're setting up, the more that they can see your body language, the more that they understand that you're coming from an appropriate, good place. I think using it up front until that trust level is established is going to be really, really important. If video isn't a part of your landscape because maybe someone doesn't have a camera or because it's just not possible, then voice is still going to be the next best thing, but appreciate that there are going to be things that are lost in the translation. So I think sometimes we just have to accept the fact that video at this moment is the new face-to-face. It's going to be the richest form of communication. It does give you the body language, the facial expression, as well as the tone of voice. And then every time you start stripping out stuff, then it positions you so when you're doing feedback, it's going to lose some stuff in translation. Of course, if you're calling somebody up to tell them great things, that's going to be a little bit different than if you're calling somebody up to say, hey, we need to talk about the fact that you missed the mark on something and we have to discuss that. And so you're going to have to make choices sometimes about what channel you use based on the type of feedback that you need to deliver. Other people, do I have anybody else who has any questions today? Question on emotion. Joshua, you have a question on emotion. What's the line between asking questions that might be too personal and not showing enough empathy? Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Particularly, that's a great question because I think this really kind of speaks to your individual team members and the fact that you're dealing with human beings. You're going to have some people who are extrovert, you're going to have some people who are introvert, and you're going to have some people who are feeling completely anxious about the fact that their personal boundaries are being invaded in crazy and unexpected ways. And I think part of this is recognizing that we have to ask questions in a way that invites people to decide what they're going to share. If you've been working with a team for a really long time and people are offering up information, then I think that's a clear indicator that somebody is a little more comfortable talking about stuff. If you are sensing that somebody is really struggling and you've asked them if there's anything you can do, you've created a private space or a very respectful private space for them to be able to discuss things with you, and they're choosing not to do that, then at that point, my suggestion is that you have a human response, which is, it's clear you're struggling. I don't want to push you, but please understand that I'm available and will certainly help you any way I can. I'll hold your confidences and understand that if there is something that I can do, then all you need to do is ask, but please also know that every time we get together, I will be saying to you, how are you doing? Is there anything that I can help you with? And I'm going to always invite you into that conversation so that people know that it's okay, that you're going to be all right with things. And then if they do share information, holding confidences, maintaining that information in a respectful and responsible way. And then don't forget, if people have shared with you, next time that you're interacting with them, touch base and do double checks and find out how they're feeling today, because people's emotion are going up and down and up and down and up and down. So we can't pretend that things are changing on a daily basis. You do your daily check-in, you offer people an opportunity, but respect if they're not ready to share. So that's our recommendation on that. So Leanne, we have a question from Leanne. Similar to the last question, we have a tight-knit team and generally have an open dialogue about performance. How do I discern short-term situational shortfalls, multitasking between work and home and school versus versus those that would benefit from coaching? Leanne, that is such a great question, because I don't think I have had a meeting or an engagement with a client, with an organization, with an individual or whatever, where things aren't changing on a routine basis. And so, Leanne, I think you got to look at, you saying that you've got a tight-knit team. It sounds like you've been together for a while. Then the first thing I would be saying to myself is this a typical behavior for this individual? And if it's an anomaly, if it's not something that has been a typical response from them, then I'd probably schedule time with them and just kind of do a check-in and say, hey, I noticed that this happened and this is really not typical of you. I'm checking in with you and make sure everything is okay. Are you all right? Has something changed? Do you need help with something? Because there may be instances, and we actually saw it with a few weeks back. We were working with a healthcare system, and all of the people that we were working with in this particular project lost their daycare almost overnight. And so suddenly when we were getting together, we had to reset all the norms, right? Because we had 3-year-olds sitting on their mom's lap. We had infants being passed to dad, and we had people who were there with their pets, and so the norms had really kind of changed. So my recommendation, Leanne, is really to look at that behavior in relation to that individual, and then think about the last time you checked in with them. Think about the history that you know of them in terms of what their physical situation is, their personal situation is, and don't be afraid to kind of check in with them first before you jump to conclusions. Because I think if we give people the benefit of the doubt, and that's an important concept in remote work in general, give people the benefit of the doubt first. And if you're seeing continued issues, then you may have to reprioritize work, or you might have to have a more pointed conversation with folks where you're saying, this has happened multiple times. I'm hearing from you that there's no issues, so I just need to hear how we can fix this going forward. So that I'll work with you. I'm here for you. The team is behind you, but we also need to execute on the task. So let's work together to figure out how to do that. and see if we can get to the bottom of what's actually driving the behavior. So when we apply a solution, we're applying a solution that will actually fix the problem and potentially help that person maintain their dignity. It could be, that they're embarrassed about something. It could be that it was a one-time thing, or it could be that they're in over their head and they don't even know what to ask you. We've had instances where we've said to people, what can we do to help? And they've looked at us with terror and said, I don't even know how to answer that question. So depending on the circumstance, it might be just related to those things. So thank you, Leanne. That was a great question. Anybody else have any other questions for me today? So I don't have anything in the chat, and we've really committed to kind of keeping these very targeted. It's a quick hit, a little bit of information, but I do want to let you know that we have recorded every single one of these sessions, and we have publicized them on our website. We're publishing the link. We'll send it out to anybody who has signed up for all of these sessions. We'll be here next week again, and we'll be talking about different ways to engage the team. So we hope you come back and join us every single Friday. And please have a safe and restful week, and as much rest as you can. I hope you can get off the screen a little bit over the weekend. And be well, be safe, and we're wishing all of that for you and your families as well. So take care, have a great weekend and week, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you so much, and we'll see you hopefully soon.